Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to Book and Puppet Company. We're very, very happy to have Gabriele Petricek here. She is visiting us from Vienna in Austria, and Gabriele is the author of a number of books. This is not her first time in Easton, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Gabriele. In 2007, she was a writer in residence for 2 months at the Lady Writers' House at Art Omi in upstate New York. And Margareta Lamm-Pfaffenberger, an Austrian-based professor of the Foreign Language and Literature Department at Lafayette College, found out that Gabriele was at that conference and asked her to come to another conference in Edmonton, Canada, to step in an emergency basis for an Austrian author who had canceled. And that was how Gabriele and Margareta met each other. And then Gabriele became the writer in residence at the Max Kade House up on College Hill for Lafayette College, and she came here, I believe, 4 times, was it? And she and Margareta organized several conferences, and the results of those conferences, the writers' conferences, are published in this book. And that's how Gabriele got to know Easton. And so I guess Easton is a little bit like a second home for you. Oh, there you go.
Yes, it is.
So. And one of the stories that we read, the first story that we read, is going to be from that book, and we're going to read it in English and German, and it is set mostly in Easton, so you'll recognize the names of the streets and so forth. And let me give a little bit about Gabriele's background. She was born in Krems, raised in Innsbruck and Vienna, where she lives now, and she was trained as a fashion designer and started to write as a correspondent for a Swiss fashion magazine, and was an art critic for international magazines and papers before her first book, Zimmerfrüchten, Suites of Rooms, came out in 2007. She has won prizes from the state of Lower Austria, the Recognition Prize, the Elias Canetti Stipend of the city of Vienna. She was writer-in-residence at several universities and libraries in the US, UK, Italy, Slovenia, and Bulgaria. And some of her work is translated into English, Bulgarian, and Hindi. And now we're going to start our program by together reading Roetails Glisten Silverdark.
Let me please before say that I thank you very much for this invitation to read in your wonderful bookstore. Andy, I stepped in 2 weeks ago and convinced you that we should have a reading together, and now I have to prove that this was a good decision.
It's a very good decision, we know already. And thank you everybody for coming for this reading. Now, you'll notice that Gabriele has a microphone, and I do not have a microphone, and that's because I'm going to be reading loudly in English, and Gabriele is going to be supplementing with German. And I just want to make sure that we can get this balanced. Okay. So here we go. Roetails, that's like a deer. Do you know what like a deer? Roetails glisten silverdark.
Der Rehe Spiegel, funkeln, silberdunkel.
Adelaide thinks she is still alive.
Nein, so eine Lungenentzündung, an der stirbt man nicht.
No, one doesn't die from pneumonia like that. Everything real. The bed, the machine, and the drip stand that is still connected to me, to my life.
Mit meinem Leben verbunden ist.
I can see how the bottle breathes. In a few days this will all be over. The impossibility of swallowing, the sighing because my chest is too constricted, as if one were pregnant in the ribs.
Zungenentlündung.
Pneumonia. Language still works the same, just sounds a bit delayed. In a few days it'll all be over. Then they'll be all ears.
Sind alle wieder Ohr. Dann bin ich wieder zu Haus, daheim in Leves. Daheim klingt wie dahimen.
Then I'll be home again. Home in Leves. Home sounds like dahimen. They always pronounce it wrongly.
Mit E am Schluss.
With an E at the end. Even the radio announcers, professional speakers, are always getting it wrong.
Dahimen.
Dahimen is the correct pronunciation. It's French. The accent grave on the first E is still to be heard in the unpronounced final E.
Im Nachhauch.
Slight hint of it. The accent grave changes the quality of the sound. It's
Ist
last
sein letzter,
quiet
leiser
breath.
Atemzug.
On 28 November, it happened again. Some smart radio announcer pronounced my name wrongly yet again. I commiserated with all my relatives on account of the fact that I had died on 23 November.
Alles falsch.
Oh, wrong.
Das war nicht ich.
That wasn't me. I'm still alive. Only my last E has
Andy
died.
ist gestorben.
Once and for all, I refuse to tolerate it anymore. The E at the end must be left off. After all, one doesn't say, I'm homey. Although, of course, that's not French. One says, home. Like,
Dahimen.
Nahimen. I insist on retaining the diacritical, since it belongs there.
Daheim konnte ich die Stiegen nicht mehr
home.
rauf und runter.
I couldn't even get up and down the stairs.
Runter leichter als rauf.
Down more easily than up.
Alle sprechen das nach, das
Everyone
falsche
imitates it,
E.
the wrong final E, regardless of whether it's the radio, publishers, literary centers, or colleagues. All of them box my ears with their final E.
Noch
I'm still
lebe ich,
alive.
meine Figuren,
All my
alle.
characters.
Sie hat nicht mehr atmen können, ist weggeschlüpft in eine Konsequenzpräsenz, hat es nicht gemerkt, ist hinübergeflossen in diesen zusattend. Nein, kein Tippfehler, ein Saugfehler, ein Schluckfehler, Sprechfehler vielleicht, aber
She couldn't breathe anymore. She slipped away into a consequential presence. Didn't notice. Flowed across into this zete. No, not a typing error, a sucking error, a swallowing error, perhaps a solecism, but
kein Fehler
not a
zu
mistake
leben.
to
Tode
live.
im Gridlock,
Death in
gefeiert, die
gridlock.
Lichtpunkte.
The points of light celebrated. Another dead squirrel is lying there, hit by a car, with its intestines and other innards squeezed out.
Rosig,
So
gelblich.
many entrails
Dunkelrot.
inside such a small animal, pinkish, yellowish, dark red. The dead animals spread out like a polar bear rug, the head also flattened, the bushy tail still intact, moving in the wind. The intestines not squashed, robust. The outside burst open
Vom Zusammenprall.
as a result of the collision.
Ich fotografiere es nicht.
I don't take a photo of it.
Das erste totgefahrene Tier, das seit Jahren ich nicht
First
fotografiere.
deceased animal that I haven't photographed for ages. The few intestines have been squeezed out, are too intimate for me. The lungs and heart are under the fur. The tail kept breathing by the cold November air. I take a step towards the brain that the
Jeder
collision
Aufprall,
has
20
thrown
Zentimeter
20 centimeters
entfernt.
further away.
Lungeneng das Raucherlos verteidigt.
Her protest note, the short story Smoker's Novella, a defense of the smoker's lot despite restriction of the lungs, will be published in spring. Buying Virginias is difficult, if not impossible. Production has been discontinued. When the supplies of Virginias come to an end, the
Begann das
Rockneck
Gespräch.
began.
Ich habe Wasser in der Lunge.
I have water in my lungs, she said.
Ich atme schwer.
I can only breathe with difficulty.
Die Stiegen in meinem Haus sind höher.
Stairs in my house are higher.
Ich gehe schwimmen
I
in
go
meine Badewanne im
swimming in my
Erdgeschoss.
bathtub on the ground floor.
Dein Herz geräuchert.
Your heart smoked,
ächzen deine Rippenbögen.
your ribs itching,
Innen bist du schwarz,
and your insides black.
nur deine Seele ist eine schneeweiße Windbäckerei.
Only your soul is a snow-white meringue. There's nothing to be ashamed about living this way, you tell yourself, and think you're still alive. Houses straight out of fairy tales with pointed towers and bay windows. I am walking up Pennsylvania Avenue. At the top of Paxenosa Road East, above the watershed, one can already see through the entrance doors, through the furnished rooms, through the unfenced gardens, through the lives on the other side, and into the other landscape. Since Adelheid has been ill,
Gehe ich
I
viel und atme
walk a
laut.
lot and
Hier oben
breathe out
pfeift der
loud.
Wind. Kein Fehler zu
Up
leben.
here the wind whistles. Not a mistake to live.
Der Bresk lässt sich
The
umschreiben.
Krenek can be rewritten, altered.
Wir
We'll
schreiben ihn
write
weg.
it out, we said to each other on the phone, well-meaning and full of belief, yet deep in our hearts, sensing it incontrovertible. So Adelheid
Adelheid blieb
stayed
selber.
in Selva, and I
Und ich fuhr
traveled to
nach
the SUA
Sua
without
ohne sie.
her. I'll visit you, she had said beforehand, coughing as she spoke. I am walking through
Gehe
foreign
im Dunkel
streets
der fremden
in the dark.
Straßen. Seit Monaten bin
I've
ich
been here
hier.
for months, and I always walk along the
gehe
self-same
mit den immer
streets,
gleichen
walk
Straßen,
along their
schreite
straightforward grid.
Ihr überschaubares
College
Netz
Hill.
den College Hill
It
hinauf.
is becoming more familiar to me.
Es wird mir bekannter.
I also go walking during the daytime. An Indian summer has been burning in your lungs for a long time. Here,
Zerstört
it is
das
destroying
Laub der Bäume.
trees' magnificent Canadian red
Kanadisch rot,
foliage,
im Rest grün,
And turning it
Cognac gold,
leftover green,
Sulfurgelb.
cognac gold, and sulfuric yellow. The leaves have fallen, set out late. I want to cross the watershed where the woods are in the houses, and herds of deer often stand as if stuffed, staring into the gardens without turning away.
Ich bin nicht tot.
I am not dead, Adelheid thinks.
Ich bin alle, die ich geschrieben habe.
I am in all the
Wir sind viel
figures
mehr als ein
I have
Tod.
created. We are much more than one death. Bones and skulls are
Zu Halloween.
spread out in front of the houses for Halloween. The gardens are full of gravestones and knives and severed hands and heads, all made of plastic. The New England porches are covered in artificial cobwebs.
Jedes herabgefallene Blatt ein
Every
Tod.
fallen leaf a death.
Kein Fehler
Not
zu
a
leben.
mistake to live.
Adelheid denkt, sie lebt noch.
Adelheid thinks she is still alive. Wanders along
Wandert auf leeren
empty
Baumstämmen
tree-lined streets.
Ich fahre in der Spätsonne
In the last
der
summer
Straßen
sun, I am riding as a
in
passenger
Cabriolet
in a cabriolet.
am Sozius.
I asked to stop for the newly killed deer. Go back and take a photograph of it. Not a single sign of a wound.
Nur liegt es.
Flies on the snout. The deer lies there, just lies there. I zoom it,
Es zoomt mich.
it zooms me. Click, click. The eye broken. The second eye turned towards the surface of the road, broken. The driver is waiting. She wants to drive on.
Adelheid
Adelaide
denkt,
thinks
sie lebt noch.
she is still alive.
Ich tue das auch.
I do the same. The thought is the membrane which I lean against, which stretches when I reach inside, and its material bulges out on her side and on my side alternately, like stiff visceral skin, like life, which she places her hands against, and we translate the bordering river and the signs of the fingers into language, invent shadowy figures and shadows and light. Who is to say that I am alive? Who knows which side is the side of life?
Gar schöne Spiele.
Nice little games, you say, meaning your sign letters.
Wie Leben geht.
How life works.
Lass den Atem durch dich
Let
durchgehen, als wäre ein neuer
through
Tag.
yourself, just as if it were a new day.
Wieder die Paxinosa Avenue hinauf. Am Anfang war sie nicht steil. Ich hätte die Cattell Street nehmen können, die Porter Street, die Reader Street, die Broadhead, sogar die abgelegene Mixell Street. Die Paxinosa Avenue war Gewohnheit.
Up Paxinosa Avenue once again. At first it's not steep. I could have taken Cattell Street, Porter Street, Reader Street, Broadhead, or even the remote Mixell Street. Paxinosa Avenue was habit. It is late, and the streets slide out of the corner of my eye, both true to scale and literally. I don't have a plan.
Sprache färbt die Wangen rot.
Reddens the cheeks, says Adelheid, who appears to me in the last glimmer of the day and strokes my cheeks consolingly, as if I were a child, at which tears fall onto the places that she touched, her cheeks so pale and beyond reach, white as Snow White's. I should be happy, she says. We are still friends and writers, just as we always have been ever since we met each other, as prize winners in the reception room of a long-deceased president. Now she is living solely in her texts.
Man könne sie lesen,
One can read them
wie wir durch die Nächte von Niew gehen.
as we walk through the night of Nienva along Neulinggasse. We see a shower cubicle standing there, just past Rechte Baumgasse, and we assure each other that it is the most natural thing in the world. We should encounter it at this hour, so we go through the shower door. And I am
Ich
pushing
schiebe mein Fahrrad
my bike
weiter bis zur Nummer
onto number
24,
24,
wo
where
sie wohnt,
she
in Enni.
lives when in Enivan, where I know my way around like my cardigan pocket, although I live in another street. Later, the shower cubicle stood there only in memory after Adelheid had had another reading in Ivana. I accompanied her home. The trams weren't running any longer. Less cheerful than inspired about possible
Mögliche
futures
Zukunften, die
that we
wir vor uns
spread
auf
out
dem
ahead of us
Marktweg
on our
ausbreiteten
nocturnal way home,
und von Sprache
and by the highly refined, effervescent
feingeschliffen, die aus dem
language that
angedachten
she would
Haus
use
am
to
Meer
write
im Süden
the
heraus,
sermon of the
dem Sermon
waves
der Wellen
from the
spritzig
intended house
gegenschreiben
on
würde.
the seafront in the south. The streets in Vannes are more winding than here, where they
Sie
are
einfach
simple,
sind, Nord, Süd,
north,
West,
south,
Ost.
west, east, a
Ein
grid
Netz aus Blöcken
of blocks
auf den College
up
Hill.
College Hill. And at the
Oben
top,
auf den Fluss schauen, der die Grenze fließt.
a view of the river that runs along the border, beyond which lies the foreign state, as they call it.
I lie flat on my back, covered up to my neck, and breathe. Suck air in through a hole in the top of my skull, and images well up as the stream of air runs through my body. You roast pork years ago in your house in Blaise, and the cold walk along the river, and afterwards the tips of our toes in front of the fire in your room. And I let the images be exhaled through the fierce fingers like the wings of lungs. Stay in the loop. How does one make contact with someone who is deceased? My winged toes breathe out. My heart with a hole breathes in. The breath draws sorrow out of the bones like an ointment for blisters. Adelheid thinks she's still alive.
She is still alive. In her house in Elsve, she gets into the bathtub on the ground floor. Everything is easier. Her lungs swim next to her on their own. Reach for the soap at the edge of the tub, wash themselves clean. The chest free and large, the bathwater black as tar from what has been washed out. The wings of the lung expand, rise, and fly several dry runs in the damp air of the bathroom, gleam, translucent, rainbow-colored, and in shiny pink glamour, the lung crawls, inhaled back into its house of the body, and the soul creates pneumatic space, the meringue.
Warum weinen alle,
Why does everybody cry
wenn sie mich im Haus sehen?
when they see me in my house, says Adelaide. It's getting dark. Lights are going on in the houses. No people inside, only furnishings. The streets slide away from me. The houses uninhabited, transparent like greenhouses. Libraries are visible behind empty armchairs. The streets shift. I walk down Broadhead and up the 800s and suddenly find myself faced by the steepness of Kemmerer Avenue, which actually lies further up after a few steps has slipped away again, and I'm standing below on the corner of March Street and Reeder Street, where I look out through the cold branches into the foreign state. Red and white lights flooding across the mighty steel bridge. Still sitting on the fence, the squirrel has not noticed the fact that I've come out. Then it sees me. Too close. Instead of fleeing, it bleats, making noises without moving its little mouth. Without moving at all. Babbles and gabbles, rants and rails. Seeks to drive me away, but I don't budge. Gets louder, becomes indignant, groans, and jumps onto a bough, after all, louder down from there, clamoring up the tree, clamoring and piping down towards me, pausing, the mouth now pointed, an outrage in his territory. I have a house here.
Hier habe ich ein Haus. Nachricht aus Elsve. Lässt dir sagen, sie meldet sich, sobald es ihr besser geht. News from Elsve. Will let you know. She'll write as soon as she feels better. Language will run again. Climb stairs, charge up a mountain and plunge into a river. Swim across Lake Attersee. Adelheid thinks her way through my immaculate body, which has been getting younger now for decades. I walk along the streets further into the country of age, being Orlando for a while, not a mistake to live.
In New York, a fast subway train passes a slower one, both traveling in the direction of the southern point, right alongside each other for a time. Then the other one faster again. It passes me. Manhattan, a lung. Its streets, bronchial tubes. The Bronx, an urban machine that pulses with cars, Times Square, and ice skating on the city pond in front of the public library. The Chrysler Building, red, green, orange, yellow, today. Cut.
Schnitt. Post aus Envy, Tage später.
Post from Envy.
Ist vorgestern gestorben.
Later,
Buttermesser durch Herz. Fällt
the
mir
day
zu.
before yesterday.
Leicht
Butter knife
wie
through
eine
the
Feder.
heart comes to mind. Light as a feather. Late in the afternoon, I am walking up Lafayette Street by Nevin Park, where the dead squirrel lies. Behind Wagand Drive, I don't take a photograph of it, but focus it. It's death not photogenic. As I take my eye from the viewfinder, the street shifts silently, whooshes, a crack opens up, extends to another street, and then continues up Porter Street, pushed round the right angle. Once again, I walk further northwestwards. The fire station with its shining red fire truck at the end of Parsons Street appears. A train trumpets below. It will not derail.
Seine Schienen
Its
für
rails
das
lead
Nahtlos.
into seamlessness.
Meine
My
Schritte
steps
tasten
grow. This
diese
street
Straße, verrutscht mir
slides
hoch,
away from
fügt
me
sich an die
too, and
Shawnee
joins up
Avenue,
with Shawnee Avenue, which
die über den Berg
leads
kaum
over the top of the hill.
kaum Häuser mehr.
Hardly any houses left.
Silberdunkel,
Eyes of
die
the
Augen der Rehe
Roetails
Spiegel.
Glisten Silverdark.
Thanksgiving ohne Truthahn,
Thanksgiving without a turkey.
Schweinsbraten,
Roast pork.
die kanadischen
These are
Wildgänse
southern climes for Canadian wild ducks, and
haben
they
hierorts
fill the
ihren
whole
Zug.
area's airspace with their pleasant chatter. Squirrels run and jump in front of my window by the writing desk. Ask myself, observing their jerky speed,
wie sie schmecken würden.
what would they taste like?
Kleine
A little
Squirrelbraten.
roast squirrel.
Die Straßen schieben wie wild gegeneinander.
Streets come together wildly, become shorter, and as if on a revolving stage, I jump into the next picture, and suddenly Hamilton Street shoots out at me. It seems as if Parsons Street leapfrogs McCartney Street, and I'm standing with a jolt in front of the block of buildings of the sports center. Then,
Und plötzlich oben
suddenly,
in Ringen
up on
von
the terraces
Fischerfield,
of Fisher Field, its
dessen
striped and
Strich und
counter-striped
Gegenstrich
crushed
gebürstete
lawn
Rasenstreifen,
lying deserted under the floodlights. A football field. The stadium roars. The terraces empty. The game is underway, yet only a soundtrack.
kein
Not
Fehler zu
A
leben.
mistake to live.
Und
And
Adelheid
Adelaide
denkt,
thinks
sie lebt
she
noch.
is still alive. I
Na,
hear her after Thanksgiving on
höre ich
live
sie
stream,
Livestream und
and the radio
der
editor
Redakteur vom
generously
Radio
prolongs her
hat das
life.
Leben um 2
by
Tage
2
großzügig
days.
verlängert.
Yet, like everyone else,
Ihren Namen aber
mispronounces
wie alle
the
mit dem
last
End-E
E of
verspricht.
her name. And Adelaide did not reach the country of old age because of the lines of demarcation.
Entlungen. Ich falle aus meinen Straßen in Schlaf.
I fall out of my streets into sleep.
Die abgefallenen Blätter auf den Wegen,
Fallen leaves
vor den
on the
Häusern mit
fields
Gebläsen
in front of the houses,
zu Haufen verjagt.
hunted with blowers into heaps.
Windhilfe,
Help for the wind.
langer Atem,
Long breaths,
fallen neue.
new ones fall. And I fall out of
Und
my
aus dem
sleep
Schlaf falle ich in die
the
Straße,
streets.
gehe sie weiter.
Keep walking along them. Pierce Street and Burke Street race ahead of me, competing with each other, opening abruptly into the third terrace of Hillside Avenue. The grid dissolves, and at the end, a
Der
cul-de-sac.
Sackgasse, no way out.
And all the animals that I photographed dead are standing there, displaying their wounds.
Ach, ich lebe nicht mehr.
Oh, I'm not living
Und ich
anymore.
habe das noch gar nicht bemerkt. Oder es ist mir
And I
entfallen.
haven't even noticed it, or it escaped me.
Denk,
Adelaide thinks that sometime it has
als
long
längst nicht
since
mehr von Bedeutung ist.
lost any importance.
Ihre Figuren
Her
sind
characters
gestreut und
Are
aufgestellt.
dispersed and in place.
Hier kann ich schreiben und rauchen.
Here I can write and
So viel ich
smoke
will.
as much as I want.
Und
And they
sie
even
lieben
supply
mich
me with
sogar
Virginias.
mit Virginias. Nächsten Sommer.
Next summer, I'll swim
Schwimme ich
across
über den
Lake
Attersee.
Attensee.
Und wenn ich 80 bin,
When I'm 80,
mache ich Reklame für die Austria Tabakwerke,
I'll do ads for the Austrian Tobacco Works.
wie ich das schon
Like I
immer
always
sage.
say I will.
Draußen
Outside,
höre ich das Meer
I can
rauschen.
hear the sound of the sea.
Ich bin daheim.
I am home.
Kein End-E,
No
In
final
sight.
E in sight.
horizontlos
Without any horizon.
und kein Fehler zu
No
leben.
mistake to live.
Danke. I forgot to say this translation, which is really very near to the original text, is made by Peter Waugh, who is who lives in Vienna but comes from London and is a poet and a translator. Thank
Did you want to read this bit of information about Adelaide?
Yeah, maybe. Adelheid lived in Upper Austria, and she wanted to visit me during my writer in residency at Lafayette College, but passed away in the clinic in a clinic in Germany on November 21st in 2010. And we met since 1995 and called each other weekly to chat about literature, politics, and relationships, everyday things, and her 3 children. This was always a very stimulating encounters, and I'm missing her. Thank you.
Now we have another piece, but did you want to ask any questions before we do the other piece? We'll take a little break.
How do you have this on paper, these 2 people?
She spliced it, I think.
Oh,
She has the German on one side. She taped it.
It is like it is made in the book. So this book is German and English. It is a documentation
Facing pages.
about the symposia, the 3 symposia we did here with all in all 12 Austrian authors, and with the students of the Lafayette College. And we have on the left side we have the German text, and on the right side the English translation. So, yeah.
Okay, so now what we're going to do is we have a film, and it's a 10-minute film, and it's based on this book, which is
Sorry, this is the German
from
version.
Himmeln, and translated as Out of the Skies, but you said you prefer From the Heavens.
Yeah, I would prefer that.
And so I'm going to read a passage in English, and then you'll see that the film utilizes this passage, but in German. So we'll have the English so you know what's going on, and then you'll see this wonderful film, and which will show on this TV monitor. And but you'll hear this text in German. Out of the skies. In late October, the weather is finally bad enough for carrying out the plan. Up here, you can't tell anything apart anymore. It's been snowing for days. The usually coherent mountain panorama has gathered into a liquid, distanceless, schematic wall that can hardly be kept at arm's length. There's no up and no down to be separated out. Plunging flakes whiz out of the sun's opalizing rays, a grayish yellow that infuses the afternoon with meager light. From out of the volume of flakes climb snow crystals, playing, whirling off, forming shapes, chimeras. The wind whips through them, the flake shapes falter, wild feathers that cannot be stuffed into a ticking, and yet they fall with great earnestness and stamina and close ranks into a unified army of snowflakes that rounds off the jagged landscape. And now it's snowing in the lowlands too. You can stare windows into this snowy commotion, glare holes out of it where it is different than in the real, the high mountain rim, where there is unrestrained light, deep and colorful, sulfur yellow and fiery red, complementary green, brain violet and fir tree black. N closes his eyes. If his looking were to slide away from the colorful doings outside to the titanium white walls here inside the room, he would no longer see anything, and red and white dots would drift into his blackened gaze, because watching the snow pushes the blood from his head and sometimes faints him. Today, N was writing again. For weeks it hadn't been working. Writing no longer makes much sense. He's going to give it up. Not right away. Only when he's totally healthy. He's feeling weak from the pneumonia. Still too weak to go down. Consumption as a cause of death was booming here a century ago, and back then this institution was one of those formerly noble sites in which it was confronted. Either it got cured, or you tripped the death fantastic with it. Sooner or later you surrendered to it, safe and sound in the thin-skinned, segregated company of similarly sickened people who noted and deciphered every slight cough, every throat clearing, every absence in the dining hall. N did not want to die of this pneumonia. That would have seemed tasteless to him, practically laughable. They let him write. It was the movement of writing with a pencil that he was so strongly drawn to. He writes every day. He writes down what the days arrange for themselves. His notes are a carefully kept journal of actions that remain nearly identical. N was never concerned with inventing a story. He was always engaged in drawing the Roman alphabet, attentively practicing the connected letters with their peaks, curls, and curves, which ultimately produce words that are repeated, that mean nothing to him, say nothing, because he renounces them the way others renounce the spoken word only to be able to inhale again and keep talking. N writes for writing's sake, which is to say, for the sake of drawing. Without meaning to, he documents the daily life of a psychiatric hospital with its negligible deviations, which make him uneasy, and which he copes with by setting them down in finely drawn letters. These are texts of the inconspicuous, testimony of his days with little variation, mostly just variance brought forth by the weather. They'd always given him paper, as much as he needed. There were times when N asked for 10 or 15 notebooks a week, even though he did not use up these quantities. At first, he hoarded the notebooks for fear they might refuse to give him any more. He stacked them under his bed. He keeps the used ones safe in his cabinet behind the linens. Composition books, A4 format, 24 sheets each, lined. The lines were important. Lines, any sort of straight ones that lead somewhere, are soothing to N. These continuous, one-dimensional geometric forms without width bolster him. Yet he also trusts other lines, curvy ones, or ones that create shapes, and considers lines beautiful. Just as he does pencils with H-scale graphite leads, preferably 4H, so that the pencil writing doesn't smudge, as is often the case with soft leads. The way he writes, he would smudge what he had written with a softer graphite lead as he continued to write. Because from the beginning of his compulsion, the medical term is scriptomania, that is, when he first came up here, he's been writing a doubly reversed script. He begins on the right side with his right hand, then he proceeds along the upper line toward the left end of the line, only to continue on the next line below in the same way. In this way, sentence by sentence, he hangs the words upside down from the lines. They hang there like bats. This is not mirror writing. His way of writing, in which the heads of the letters hang down and the ends of the words run to the left, contains a way of reading that is the normal one if the notebook is turned 180 degrees. Reading from the upper left to the right, each line remains a cipher within the text as a whole and tells something unreal or remains unintelligible. For a long time now, N's letters glide almost fluidly from the movements of his hand, which at first seem awkward and uncertain. He decided to write doubly backward because his normal handwriting, running to the right, soon skidded into illegibility. Ascenders, descenders, certain letter combinations, and word endings in this handwriting slurred into arabesques, graphs, and generous shorthand symbols, and such ornamentation interfered with the legibility of these sentences, but also because in the normal way of writing, his sentences would have gotten complicated, and he needed something in his life that was simple. And it's possible that this would have become a real creative work if he had permitted his words and sentences to develop into stories. In this way, however, he writes simple sentences that are always decipherable. His method of hanging the letters like knitting from knitting needles looks like the laborious handiwork of a schoolboy learning the alphabet. N is not yet old. Moreover, some years have left less of a mark on his face than those actually lived. Measured against the 78 years that actuaries have calculated as the life expectancy of males in Europe, he still has a quarter century before reaching this threshold value and crossing the line. He has already spent that many years up here, a sort of half-life period. But who knows how far his lifetime will extend beyond the mortality charts of the insurance companies. He had never been back down there, never again with the Flatlanders who have become so distant from him. He has long since clipped the line that he had to them, and now they seem to him as if they were living in a two-dimensional world where everything is flat. Breathing, as well as looking, as well as writing, as well as walking, as well as hearing. N attributes the absence of the third dimension, which to his mind is not the final one, in the ankle zones of the earth, to the air down there, which was extremely thick for a denizen of the high mountains, which he had rapidly become.
I think you can stop here. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And just let me say that this translation was made by Jeffrey C. Hawes, Professor Emeritus of Bowling Green State University, Ohio.
Ende Oktober ist das Wetter schließlich schlecht genug für das Vorhaben. Hier oben ist nichts mehr zu unterscheiden. Es schneit seit Tagen. Das ansonst schlüssige Bergpanorama ist zu einer liquiden, distanzenlosen Schemenwand versammelt, die kaum auf Armeslänge zu halten ist. Kein Oben, kein Unten herauszulösen. Stürzende Flocken schwirren aus dem Opalisieren der Sonneneinstrahlung, ein Graugelb, das den Nachmittag dürftig verleuchtet. Der Wind durchsaust sie, die Flockenbilder straucheln, wilde Federn, die nicht in ein Inlet sich füllen lassen. Dennoch fallen sie mit großem Ernst und Ausdauer und backen zusammen als geschlossenes Flockenheer, das die schartige Landschaft rundet. Auch im Flachland schneit es nun. Man kann Fenster in das Schneegetümmel schauen, Löcher herausgluren, in denen es anders ist als im Real des sie umgebenden Hochgebirgsrands. Da ist unbändiges Licht, tief und farbenvoll. Heute hat N wieder geschrieben. Wochenlang war es nicht gegangen. Das Schreiben macht nicht mehr viel Sinn. Er wird es aufgeben. Nicht gleich, erst wenn er ganz gesund ist. Er fühlt sich schwach von der Lungenentzündung, zu schwach noch, um hinunterzugehen. Die Schwindsucht war der Sterbefaktor, der vor einem Jahrhundert hierorts Hochkonjunktur hatte und dieses Haus eine jener ehemals noblen Stätten, in denen ihr begegnet wurde.
sammeln lieb kaum auf zu einer hybriden, distanzenlosen Schemen, ansonsten schlüssige Bergpanorama.
Sie haben ihn schreiben lassen. Es war die Bewegung des Schreibens mit dem Bleistift, zu der es ihn drängte. Er schreibt jeden Tag. Die Wörter und die Sätze bleiben ähnlich. Er schreibt auf, was sich die Tage ausmachen. Seine Aufzeichnungen sind ein sorgfältiges Journal beinahe gleichbleibender Handlungen. Niemals ging es um das Erfinden einer Geschichte, stets nur um das Zeichnen der Lateinschrift, um das aufmerksame Üben der zusammengefügten Buchstaben mit den Spitzen, Kringeln und Rundungen, die schließlich Wörter ergeben. N schreibt, um zu schreiben, also um zu zeichnen. Er dokumentiert, ohne es zu beabsichtigen, das Alltägliche einer Nervenheilanstalt mit seinen unerheblichen Abweichungen, die ihn beunruhigen und denen er beikommt, indem er sie mit fein gezeichneten Buchstaben festmacht. Es sind Texte des Unauffälligen, Bekundungen seiner Tage mit wenig Variation. Meist Spielarten nur, die das Wetter hervorbringt. Stets hatte man ihm Papier gegeben, so viel er brauchte. Es gab Zeiten, da verlangte N 10, 15 Hefte die Woche, wiewohl er diese Mengen nicht verbraucht hat. Anfangs hortete er die Hefte aus Angst, man könnte sie ihm verweigern, stapelte sie unter seinem Bett. Die verbrauchten verwahrt er in seinem Schrank hinter der Wäsche. Schulhefte in A4 zu je 24 Blatt, liniert. Das Linierte war wichtig. Linien, überhaupt gerade, die irgendwohin führen, beruhigen N. Diese zusammenhängenden, eindimensionalen, geometrischen Gebilde ohne Querausdehnung geben ihm Rückhalt. Doch vertraut er auch anderen Linien, gewundenen oder formgebenden. Die Linie findet N schön. Denn vom Beginn seines Dranges an, medizinisch Skriptomanie, das war, als er hier heraufkam, schreibt er doppelt verkehrt. Satz um Satz hängt er so die Wörter verkehrt auf die Linien. Sie hängen dort wie Fledermäuse. Seine Schreibweise, bei der die Buchstabenköpfe nach unten hängen und die Wortenden gegen links laufen, birgt eine Lesweise, nämlich die normale, wird das Heft um 180 Grad gedreht. Gelesen von links oben und nach rechts laufend, bleibt jede Zeile eine Binnenschrift im Textganzen und erzählt etwas Unwirkliches oder bleibt unverständlich. Seit langem gleiten N seine Buchstaben geradezu fluidal aus der anfangs ungelenken, umdenkenden Handbewegung. Er hatte sich entschlossen, doppelt verkehrt zu schreiben, weil ihm die normale rechtslaufende Handschrift bald ins Unleserliche verschlittert war. Die sauerstoffarme Bergluft hat den Schreibdrang ursprünglich ausgelöst. Dass dieser in den letzten Monaten nachgelassen hatte, beunruhigte ihn, bis ihm klar war, dieses Auslassen birgt eine Veränderung mit sich, die er verstehen müsste, um ihr gerecht zu werden. Die Schreibwut war ihm unmerklich abhanden gekommen. Anfangs verlegte er Bleistifte, später vergaß er neues Schreibmaterial anzufordern. Die Lungenentzündung war das Menetekel seiner Metamorphose. Hatte er sich noch in den Bleistiftdienst gezwungen, und seine Schreibration in täglicher, strenger Disziplin erledigt, so verhalf ihm die Pneumonie, sich ihr zu entheben. Sie hätte ihn um weniges auch der Pflicht des Atmens entledigt.
Das Federn, der nicht sie Amaro nachgreift, ist Flockensnuss nach Namischen, Sohnes Nazieren, die Willen ja aus vor, Moor, Spielen, Masserbeln, Narmen, Hosten, Flockenvolumen, steigen, Semra, Ernest drückt, Sölusoren, nun der Sonnenriechstrahlung zu ein Augen voll Flocken, Ohren aus dem Polartieren, aus ein unten herauszulösen, stürzende Arme, Menschen, Gärtchen, Muluven, keine Zofen, Wanne, sammeln, lieb, kaum auf, so aus einer liquiden, distanzenlosen Schemen, ansonsten flüssige Bergpanorama ist hinscheiden, es schneit seit Tagen und Netz heroben, nichts mehr zu unterstellen genug. Für das Vorhaben soll Ende Oktober ist das Wetter schnell auch im Flachland schneit es nun, dass die schattige Landschaft zusammengeschlossene Haufen und im Ernst nur Osterbacken hinfüllen, Bohres dennoch das Wernsch Federn, der nicht sie Amaro nachgreift, ist Flockensnuss nach Namischen, Sohnes Nazieren, die Willen ja aus.
Well, that was really wonderful. I love that film. That's a great film.
It's a slow film. It's not like we are used to see these quick cuts, and so you have to be patient.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for your reading.
Oh, thank
It was
you.
perfect. I like it.
I love the writing. Okay, so thank you everybody for coming for Gabriele Petricek.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you. We were reading Out of the Skies, and we saw the funkeln Himmeln,
Yes.
and we saw the film, and we also read Roetails Glisten Silverdark. And if you want to get a copy, you can order this from Book and Puppet Company. We can get Out of the Skies for you. Gabriele, how long are you going to be in Easton now?
Another 10 days now, and I hope to come back in fall.
Great. Okay, well, we hope to see you then too.
Yes.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. See
Thank
you
you
next time.
very much.